still recall that night in 2015, a night that altered my life forever. I'm Clint McCready, a long-haul trucker who spent years navigating endless highways, but nothing could have prepared me for the terror I encountered on Route 666, a stretch of road so notorious for inexplicable disappearances that some locals now call it the Devil's Highway. I was hauling a load of lumber from Colorado to Arizona when I merged onto Route 666. The sun had long since set, leaving behind a black ribbon of asphalt framed by craggy mountain passes and twisted trees that seemed to whisper dark secrets. Despite its official designation as Route 491 on newer maps, the old name Route 666 clung stubbornly to its reputation, a curse among those who traversed its lonely miles. I tuned into the local CB radio, seeking company in the static-filled silence, when suddenly, my GPS flickered and died. With no digital guidance and only the sound of my engine and my own thoughts for company, I pressed onward into the suffocating darkness. As I drove further, isolation wrapped around me like a shroud. The occasional neon glimmer from a distant gas station barely penetrated the overwhelming blackness. My eyes strained against the dark, and every shadow seemed to pulse with hidden menace. Then, as if emerging from the void, I spotted it, a rusted 18-wheeler trailing my rig. Its silhouette was unmistakable, a hulking, dilapidated truck with chipped paint and no visible license plates. Most disturbingly, its headlights were off, swallowed by the night, and its cab appeared unnervingly empty. For a moment, I questioned my tired eyes, but the phantom truck persisted in my rearview mirror, matching my every move. A cold dread gripped me as I realized that no human behind that wheel could be controlling a truck like this. It was as if the very spirit of the road had taken form. My pulse pounded in my ears as I accelerated, pushing my truck from 70 to 80, then 90 miles per hour. I hoped that sheer speed would shake the specter trailing me, but it kept pace, a silent predator stalking its prey. With trembling hands on the wheel, I reached for the CB radio, desperate for an explanation. Out of the crackle emerged a woman's voice, faint and distorted, yet laced with an unmistakable urgency. "Turn around, they're in the trees." Her words sent a chill through me, amplified by the sudden intrusion of anguished screams over the radio. The message was clear, yet impossible to comprehend. I glanced into my rearview mirror once more. The phantom truck was still there, relentless in its pursuit. The voice urged me to reverse course, but the thought of venturing into the unknown gloom of the roadside woods filled me with dread. I had no choice but to obey that chilling warning. My instincts screamed to turn around, yet a strange compulsion urged me onward. I swerved slightly, hoping to lose the spectral follower in a maze of twisting turns, but every maneuver I made was mirrored perfectly by the phantom truck. Then, without warning, a blast of a truck horn shattered the silence, a harsh, blaring note that seemed to come from nowhere. The horn's shrill sound spurred me to press the accelerator even harder. My truck roared down the highway, a blur of light and shadow as the world outside morphed into a chaotic blend of dark shapes and fractured neon. Still, the ghostly rig clung to my tail like an unyielding curse. Every mile felt like a descent deeper into a nightmare, and the oppressive presence of unseen eyes watching from the roadside made my skin crawl. Then, fate intervened in the most brutal way. In a desperate bid to escape, I took a sharp turn along a narrow, winding section of the highway. The tires screeched as I fought for control, but the laws of physics cared little for my terror. My rig spun wildly, and before I could react, I slammed into something hidden, a rock or a fallen branch. I couldn't tell. Metal groaned and twisted as my truck careened off the road, plunging into a deep, unforgiving ditch. For a heart-stopping moment, darkness swallowed me. The roar of the engine, the frantic pounding of my heart, even the distant whisper of the wind, all were silenced in that frozen instant. When I finally came to, I was disoriented and bleeding, sprawled amid shattered glass and twisted metal. My vision blurred. I crawled toward the cab, hoping against hope that I wasn't alone. Inside the wrecked cab, as I fumbled for my belongings in a haze of pain and confusion, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Carved deep into the battered metal of my trailer were words I hadn't seen before. The message, crude yet deliberate, felt like a direct communication from the darkness itself. Trembling, I reached into the glove box and pulled out a small, aged Polaroid. The grainy photograph depicted my rig parked on that cursed highway that very night, but the most disturbing detail was the shadowy figures crawling underneath the trailer, figures that seemed to emerge from the very depths of the earth. I stared at the photo for what felt like an eternity, trying to decipher its meaning. Were those lost souls remnants of tragedies long buried? Or were they the very embodiment of the curse that haunted Route 666? In the days that followed, the incident tormented me. I quit trucking immediately, unable to shake the vision of that spectral truck and the eerie message etched in metal. I spent sleepless nights poring over my recordings, revisiting every crackle of static and every whispered warning on the CB radio. Local authorities found no trace of skid marks or any evidence that could explain the bizarre collision. Only my story and that haunting Polaroid. As word of my encounter spread among truckers and locals, similar tales began to emerge. Veterans of the road recalled glimpses of a rusted rig with an empty cab that appeared without warning and vanished into thin air. Some swore that on moonless nights, the glow of non-existent headlights could be seen reflecting in puddles along the highway. Online forums exploded with first-hand accounts, grainy photos, shaky videos, and whispered confessions that painted Route 666 as a living, malevolent entity. According to local lore, decades ago, a tragic accident on this very road claimed the lives of several truckers under mysterious circumstances. Their spirits, unable to find rest, were said to have become bound to the asphalt, doomed to haunt the highway for eternity. Others whispered of an ancient curse, a malevolence that exacted a terrible price on any who disturbed the delicate balance between the living and the dead. Each story, each shared memory, only deepened my terror. I began to question whether my encounter was a random, isolated incident or if I had unwittingly become part of a much larger, unsolvable mystery, one that stretched back through the annals of time. Even now, as I sit in the safety of my small apartment far from those cursed highways, I can still hear the echoes of that night. In quiet moments, I catch a faint whisper of a woman's voice on an old CB channel, her message repeating like a mantra, "Turn around, they're in the trees." And in the depths of the night, I sometimes see the ghostly reflection of that phantom truck in my dreams, a relentless specter with an empty cab and a message that haunts every mile of Route 666. I share my story not to revel in my own terror, but as a warning. If you ever find yourself on that isolated stretch of road, where darkness reigns and the past intertwines with the present, be vigilant. Trust your instincts. And if your CB radio crackles with warnings or your headlights reveal a rusted silhouette in the rearview mirror, do not ignore it. For on Route 666, the line between the living and the dead is perilously thin, and some terrors are best left unprovoked. The legend of the phantom truck endures, a spectral omen for those who dare travel the devil's highway. I've long since abandoned the world of long-haul trucking, but the memory of that cursed night remains an indelible scar on my soul. The highway continues to claim its toll, and drivers still report encounters with a rusted, empty truck chasing them through the darkness. I leave you with this final thought. Some roads carry secrets too heavy to bear, and some curses refuse to fade with time. If you ever journey along Route 666, keep your wits about you, and remember that the past is never truly dead. In the silence of the night, as you push forward through the darkness, you might just find that you're not alone, and that the phantom truck is watching, waiting for you to join its unending, haunted procession. October 2019, a cold, unyielding night on I-35 in Oklahoma. Hannah Lee, a college student burdened by late-term assignments and sleepless nights, finally pulled off the highway. Her tired eyes scanned the horizon until she found it, the Red River Rest Stop. It was nothing more than a lonely patch of cracked concrete, flanked by dead cornfields that stretched into a void. Yet, in that desolate moment, something about the place felt foreboding, as if it held secrets too dark to be spoken aloud. Hannah's car idled under a flickering street lamp that barely held back the encroaching darkness. The rest stop, abandoned by most travelers, exuded a quiet desperation, a place where time seemed to have forgotten itself. With a shudder, she stepped out to stretch her cramped legs. The rain had started falling in a steady, eerie drizzle that painted everything in shades of silver and shadow. She made her way slowly across the lot, her eyes darting nervously from one broken vending machine to another. The machines were rusted and lifeless, their glass panels smeared with water and grime. Even the bathrooms, which should have offered a moment of respite, had their doors securely locked, as if to keep something out or in. Then, from beneath the weak glow of the street lamp, she saw her, a figure standing motionless in the middle of the lot, a woman dressed in a tattered white gown that looked as if it had been lifted straight from a bygone era. Her bare feet were planted on the cold concrete, and long, unkempt black hair cascaded down her shoulders like a dark curtain. But what sent a jolt through Hannah's body was that the woman's face was obscured by shadow. There were no features, no smile, no frown, just an absence that made it seem as if her identity had been erased. Hannah's heart pounded as she stared at the apparition. The figure raised a pale hand and, in a slow, deliberate motion, pointed north. Something in that gesture, so deliberate and filled with a silent urgency, compelled Hannah to follow the gaze. Reluctantly, she turned her head toward the direction indicated and squinted into the darkness. At the edge of the rest stop, partially buried in the mud, lay a small, worn child's backpack. Its faded fabric was torn in places, and dirt caked over its surface hinted at a long-forgotten neglect. With trembling hands, Hannah unzipped the bag. Inside, she found a tattered stuffed bear whose button eyes reflected the dim light, a nearly empty juice box, and most disturbingly, a handwritten note. The message, scrawled in uneven, desperate letters, read, "Help me, she's in the cornfield." A chill deeper than the autumn air slithered down her spine. Was this some sick prank, or was it a genuine cry for help? The note was not ambiguous. It was a raw plea edged with terror. Hannah's mind raced. She fumbled for her phone and dialed 911, her voice quivering as she explained the bizarre scene. The operator's tone was clinical, yet there was a note of urgency as they promised to dispatch officers immediately. Within minutes, the sound of sirens cut through the murmur of the rain. 2 police cars pulled up under the feeble street lamp, their red and blue lights dancing over the cracked pavement. Officers in crisp uniforms emerged, their expressions a mix of skepticism and routine professionalism. They questioned Hannah, inspected the backpack, and took the note. One of them, an older man with tired eyes, dismissed the incident with a curt, "Probably some pranksters messing around." Yet, even as they spoke, Hannah could feel that something was terribly wrong. As the officers finished their cursory investigation and began to clear the scene, Hannah returned to her car, desperate to leave the unnerving tableau behind. She merged back onto I-35, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. But as she drove away, her heart hammered in her chest when she glanced into her rearview mirror. There, reflected in the dim interior light of her car, was the woman in white. She wasn't standing at the rest stop anymore. She was in the back seat. Her head was tilted slightly to the side, her featureless face partly illuminated by the dashboard glow, revealing a ghastly, unnatural smile with jagged, broken teeth. The sight was so surreal, so impossible, that for a moment time seemed to freeze. Panic overtook Hannah. She slammed on the brakes, but her car skidded uncontrollably on the wet pavement. The world outside became a blur of dark shapes and fleeting headlights until, with a sickening crunch, her car crashed into a roadside ditch. In the chaos, glass shattered, metal twisted, and a wrenching silence followed the cacophony of the accident. When rescuers eventually arrived, they found Hannah unconscious, her body battered, and her eyes wide with unspeakable horror. In the aftermath, she would be heard screaming incoherently, "She's still in the corn! She's still in the corn!" as if the nightmare had seeped into her very soul. In the hospital, while Hannah fought to regain consciousness, the story of the woman in white began to spread like wildfire. Her dashcam, salvaged from the wreckage, had captured that horrifying glimpse in the rearview mirror. The footage was crude yet unmistakable. A spectral figure in a ghostly white dress, staring with a smile that was both alluring and monstrous. Within days, the video had amassed millions of views online, igniting a firestorm of speculation and terror. Viewers began to piece together an even darker narrative. Many noted that the image of the woman in white bore a disturbing resemblance to photographs from the 1940s. In one set of old, grainy images circulating on internet forums, there was a family, a mother, a father, and a small child dressed in the fashions of a long-forgotten era. Their faces were solemn, their eyes void of hope. Oddly, the family's checkout date from the very rest stop was left conspicuously blank, as if they had never truly departed. Rumors quickly spread that the family had perished under mysterious circumstances, their spirits doomed to remain tethered to the spot, forever haunting the lonely patch of concrete. Local folklore grew around the incident. Neighbors in nearby towns whispered of a tragic event, a young mother and her child who had vanished into the endless cornfields decades ago, their disappearance shrouded in mystery and sorrow. Some elders claimed that on cold, moonless nights, the ghost of that mother could be seen wandering the rest stop, holding a juice box as if it were a talisman against the encroaching darkness, her face contorted in perpetual anguish. The story didn't end there. Months later, new reports began to surface from drivers along I-35. Several motorists claimed to have seen a figure resembling the woman in white standing by the roadside, her ghostly dress fluttering in the wind, her eyes reflecting an endless, haunting sadness. One truck driver even insisted that, during a long haul through Oklahoma, he caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror, seated silently in the back of his rig, as if she had slipped aboard unnoticed. A local radio host, intrigued by the phenomenon, interviewed a night shift worker from a nearby gas station who recounted his own eerie encounter. "I was closing up shop when I looked into the service window," the man said in a hushed tone, "and there she was, staring right at me. I couldn't move. I swear, it felt like she was trying to tell me something." The worker's account added another layer of dread to the legend, suggesting that the spirit wasn't content with merely haunting a single rest stop. It was roaming, seeking, and perhaps even luring unsuspecting souls into its dark orbit. As more tales emerged, the authorities remained skeptical, chalking the sightings up to mass hysteria or misidentified drifters. Yet the consistent details, the broken checkout, the unmistakable image of a woman in a ragged white dress, the haunting phrase scrawled in a child's note, made it impossible for many to dismiss the phenomenon as mere urban legend. Even though the Red River rest stop was demolished in 2020, replaced by a new highway interchange built for safety and modernization, the curse of the woman in white seemed to persist. Travelers in the area continued to report eerie encounters. Some claimed that on stormy nights, when the wind howled across the barren cornfields, a faint silhouette of a woman could be seen drifting near the roadside. Others swore they heard the soft, melancholic whisper of a voice, a plea for help, echoing across the darkness. Hannah's experience, though horrifying and traumatic, had unwittingly cemented her place in local legend. Her story was recounted around campfires, shared on late-night radio shows, and dissected in countless online forums. And in every retelling, the image of the woman in white grew ever more vivid, a spectral reminder that some ghosts never truly fade away. To this day, those who travel I-35 on dark, cold nights speak of a restless spirit wandering the desolate stretches of highway. They say that if you slow down and look carefully in your rearview mirror, you might just catch a glimpse of her, an eternal passenger with a smile as broken as the promises of the past, silently pleading for a ride that will never come. So if you ever find yourself alone on a lonely stretch of highway, where the dead cornfields meet the night, remember the tale of the woman in white. And if you ever see a figure in a tattered gown standing by a flickering street lamp at a forgotten rest stop, if you see those eyes, hollow and full of sorrow, pray that you never pick up the call for help. For sometimes, the ghosts of the past are waiting to ride along, and once they have you in their sight, there is no escaping the curse of the lost. It was late autumn 2008 when our family set out on what we thought would be a routine road trip through rural Nebraska. My husband, Mark, and our two spirited twins were en route along Highway 281, a long, lonesome stretch of road that cut through endless fields and forgotten towns. We'd been driving for hours, and as the sky darkened with swirling storm clouds, fatigue and unease began to settle over us like a thick fog. I remember the moment vividly. The rain intensified, hammering our windshield, and our GPS suddenly recalculated our route. The screen flashed rerouting, and then directed us onto a narrow, unmarked road. Mark hesitated, but with the storm forcing our tires off the smooth asphalt, we had little choice. We turned off the main highway and followed the unfamiliar path until, to our astonishment, we emerged onto a long-forgotten stretch of road that led to a cluster of crumbling farmhouses. The sign read, "Welcome to Cedar Hollow," but something about it sent a shiver down my spine. Cedar Hollow, a town that shouldn't exist, loomed before us like a relic from another era. The village was shrouded in darkness. Its boarded-up windows and sagging roofs looked as if time had abandoned it decades ago. There were no streetlights, no movement, no life, only an oppressive silence broken by the intermittent buzz of a broken neon sign. Our GPS had rerouted us here, as if it were guiding us to our fate. We drove slowly down a rough, unpaved road lined with dead cornfields that swayed eerily in the wind. In the midst of that barren landscape, one building stood out, a small diner glowing in an unnaturally brilliant neon blue. Its light pierced the darkness, a stark contrast to the decaying facades of the surrounding houses. There was something almost magnetic about it, drawing us in despite our growing apprehension. Inside the diner, the atmosphere was as unsettling as it was surreal. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting long, distorted shadows across the worn linoleum floor. In the corner, an old jukebox played Hotel California, on an endless loop. The melody, familiar yet hauntingly warped by static, echoed through the empty space. Behind the counter stood a solitary waitress, her appearance as out of place as the diner itself. She wore a faded uniform, and a tarnished name tag read, Mabel, 1932. Her eyes were distant, and her expression was one of quiet despair, as if she had been waiting for someone, or something, for far too long. In a soft, trembling voice, she warned, "Don't stay past midnight." Her words were barely audible over the din of the jukebox and the storm raging outside, yet they pierced the uneasy quiet like a death knell. We exchanged glances. The twins, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, chattered nervously. But a sense of foreboding took hold. We tried to leave, but the diner's door was inexplicably locked from the inside. Before we could react, the clock on the wall ticked closer to midnight. At 11:58 p.m., a blood-curdling scream shattered the fragile calm. Our twins, usually playful and unafraid, shrieked in terror, their eyes wide with horror. We rushed to the car, our hearts pounding in unison with the relentless storm outside. As we piled back into the vehicle, I peered through the rain-streaked windshield and gasped. Surrounding our car were dark, indistinct figures, silhouettes with no discernible faces, their forms barely visible in the downpour as they pounded on the car's windows. They moved with a jerky, unnatural rhythm, as though animated by a force beyond human comprehension. Panic seized us. Mark floored the accelerator, and the car lurched forward, careening away from the diner. But the nightmare was far from over. The road ahead seemed to twist and loop in on itself. Every time we thought we had escaped, we found ourselves back at Cedar Hollow. The diner, with its eerie neon glow, reappeared in our rearview mirror time and again. No matter which route we took, the same desolate village greeted us like a relentless trap. We were caught in a macabre loop, a purgatorial journey that defied all logic. Mark's knuckles turned white as he drove faster through the torrential rain, desperate to break free from the cursed cycle. In a final act of desperation, he swerved off the main road into a dense cornfield. The car shuddered as it barreled through the tangled stalks, the cacophony of rustling corn mingling with our terrified cries. For what felt like an eternity, we hurtled through the field, the world outside reduced to a blur of green and shadow. Eventually, the car emerged on the other side, battered and bruised but free from the relentless pull of Cedar Hollow. In the aftermath of that nightmarish escape, our relief was tinged with lingering terror. The twins, now quiet and withdrawn, began drawing the same unbidden nightmare over and over. A diner filled with faceless people, waving goodbye with hollow, silent hands. Years passed, but the memory of that night never faded. In 2023, a local historian delved deeper into the mystery of Cedar Hollow. His research unearthed a tragic tale. In 1932, a devastating fire had swept through the town, claiming the lives of all 47 residents. Among them was a young waitress named Mabel, whose name still haunted the remnants of the diner. The historian discovered that Cedar Hollow had been abandoned shortly after the fire, its buildings left to crumble and its souls left to wander. The diner, with its eternal neon blue glow and looping jukebox, had become a spectral echo of a bygone era, a place where the dead were forever trapped, unable to leave. The revelation sent chills down our spines. It explained the inexplicable loop, the ghostly figures, and the final warning from Mabel so many decades ago. Cedar Hollow was not merely an abandoned town. It was a prison for lost souls, and on that fateful night, we had brushed against its cursed legacy. Even now, Sarah refuses to drive at night. The twins, now older, still recount the harrowing vision of that diner filled with faceless figures, the eerie sight of ghostly hands waving farewell as if bidding them to join the eternal procession. And sometimes, when the rain falls heavy and the wind howls across the empty fields, Sarah swears she hears it, a distant, haunting melody from a jukebox, playing our song on a loop, as if summoning us back to Cedar Hollow. I often lie awake on stormy nights, haunted by the memory of that vanishing village. I picture the neon blue diner emerging from the darkness like a beacon of sorrow and regret, its windows filled with the ghostly faces of those who never checked out. I wonder if, somewhere along the twisted roads of Highway 281, the spirits of Cedar Hollow are still waiting for someone to carry their final farewell, trapped forever in a cycle of despair. For anyone traveling those lonely stretches of highway, heed this warning. Some roads lead to places that should not exist. When a storm forces you off the beaten path, and you find yourself face to face with a ghostly town lost in time, trust your instincts and drive away. For For Cedar Hollow is more than just an abandoned town. It is a gateway to a realm where the dead linger, and where every passing moment is a reminder that the past is never truly gone. The highway connects us, but it also divides. Between the living and the lost, between safety and what waits in the ditches, the rest stops, the fog. These stories were never solved. The phantom trucks still prowl, the woman in white still wanders, and Cedar Hollow still hungers. So next time you drive alone, check your mirrors. Slow down for hitchhikers, and whatever you do, don't stop for neon lights.